delighted today to be joined by Megan Sims. Megan, you're joining us to chat to us about a really important topic about online safety and the protection of women online. And I suppose I should just flag that, you know, this discussion might be including some topics that maybe for younger ears, you know, just to be aware that there might be some topics throughout the conversation that listeners may want a kind of a content warning for. But Megan, to bring us back to 2020 in particular, because we know this issue was particularly under the spotlight in 2020. I mean, it's been an issue for years, but really came to a prominence last year. Would you remind us why that was?
So throughout the year, it was obviously, there was a lot more talks around it since I started the petition and the campaign. I was kind of going on the media all the time. I was on the radio and newspapers constantly, but it really came to a head in November with the leak. So to give it an idea of the scope, we sent 45 links to the guards. And in just 2 of those links, there was 245,000 images of just Irish women and girls. So the scope of it was incredible. And obviously it was a crime against women, a horrific crime against women, obviously. So that blew up, I think, when people realized the scope of it. And that wasn't even, that I'm going to be honest, that's not even 100th of what is out there. So then obviously then it was reported to the guards and everything, and it was brought into the Dáil, and then they fast-tracked legislation which was signed in before Christmas and came into action last week around the 9th. The legislation is now in action, so the protection is now there in case images do get shared without consent.
Okay, so just to check in on what that law is, I believe that's Coco's law, named after Nicole Fox, who very sadly died by suicide after online bullying. The official name, just to give its official name, the Harassment, Harmful Communications and Related Offences Act. So the idea behind this is, as you said, if a woman or a girl even is affected by an issue like this, they have some legal recourse.
Yeah, so it covers basically all online harassment and cyberbullying, which is obviously as much of an issue. And I think with image-based sexual abuse, which would be what I kind of focus in, what my whole campaign was for. But with that comes the online bullying, because it's done generally, I would say, to shame people or to get back. Like, it's not, like, I know it's called revenge porn, it's not revenge porn, but a lot of times it's a couple and they split up and it's used kind of a form as coercive control, or if you break up with me, I'm going to send out your photos, or other forms of harassment also come with it. So the legislation covers kind of loads of areas of that, which is actually amazing.
And it's a really important point that you made there, because I know the terminology around this has really progressed over the last while, because we were in a conversation space where we were talking about revenge porn, but we have moved on to the term now image-based sexual abuse. And I think, I don't know if you would agree that that's just a really important way of highlighting just how serious this is, to refer to it as sexual abuse.
Yeah, so when I made the petition last March. So it's been a year, literally, of working on this constantly. I made the petition called Revenge Porn. And I put under it like image-based sexual abuse. But I knew at the time, nobody knew what image-based sexual abuse was. So it was more important for me to get the notice out there that we have no laws when the rest of the world does, rather than focus on the terminology. And then it was like, okay, now that's out there, we can now focus on having the conversations around terminology, because I do think it's equally as important how we phrase this, because if you hear the term revenge porn, even if you're a victim of it, you're going to say, oh, well, did I do something wrong? And how we phrase these things is incredibly important.
Most certainly. And I think we're all really becoming more and more aware of how the words we use can affect things and how important it is to get those words right. And on that then, and I most certainly don't want to make you talk about a topic about which you're not uncomfortable, but if you wouldn't mind giving us a sense of why this topic was so important to you and why you said, okay, I need to get this petition and campaign going.
Okay, give me 1 second. They can edit this out anyway.
I'm sure they can. Yeah.
My bloody nose, my throat keeps swelling off the that, and I'm just, hang on, I have a can here. Okay, right, I can answer. Sorry. Of all days, like, I've been so sick last week, and I don't want to do it when I can't even speak. Okay, I get into my story. Hang on. Okay, so in 2016, I was a victim of image-based sexual abuse. I had my photos and videos shared, I'd say, hundreds of thousands of times. Thousands of people were talking about it. I could see it online, and then they were uploaded to Facebook. People were sending them to my friends, my family, everybody. the bullying was so bad from it that I actually tried to take my own life. This was 2016. I logged into my Facebook and I had 400 plus messages calling me every name under the sun and telling me to kill myself, which obviously then I tried to, because I was just like, my life is over now. This is it. Like, I thought, like, I'll never be able to get a job. Like, I'm going to be single forever. Nobody's going to want me. You know, it's the shame and the stigma that came with it. I thought my life was completely over. So I took 2 years off social media, and then I came back on it only literally basically this year when I started the campaign, because we still had no laws and it was still happening. I had people reaching out to me all the time, and then since, I kind of had so many people reaching out to me since I started the petition, like maybe 10 people a day sometimes, for help with image-based sexual abuse, just not knowing what to do because there's no supports and no laws. So basically that's the background of my story, and I was just doing that for a year until you come up to the leak. It's been a trip.
And I mean, I have to commend you, because first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And I think a lot of people would have that sympathy for you. But to take that experience then and have the initiative and the strength to be able to go on to affect real change, because you were part of that real change and getting that law enacted, it really is admirable. You've mentioned, and it's come up, this idea of shame. And I suppose, I don't know if you feel it's an important point to highlight about, again, moving the conversation on so that no woman is ever bearing the shame of this. Like, the shame needs to be on the people who abuse and misuse these images.
Absolutely. And that's why getting the law passed was the most important thing. So once it's a criminal offence, you can start flipping the narrative, which is what I tried to do in my own story. So for me, it was my life was over. And then I tried to, the only thing that got me through was flipping the narrative in my head. I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. This is something that was done to me to hurt me, you know? So I think Ireland especially, we have a long history of shame, and women, unfortunately, when you think women were locked up for being considered promiscuous well into the 2000s, basically. So I think these are kind of the remnants of that kind of religious idea of women and sexuality. It's still something I think that isn't really talked about or not enough education on. It's still something that's swept under the rug. And I think until we're able to have honest conversations about this, there won't be any change. And I do think that that is the main reason. It's the misogyny and it's the shame that causes all of this to happen. And then also adds to the hurt of it, because you internalize all that shame.
We know that Shine Festival is obviously promoted at girls and young women and women in general, and inspiring them and empowering them. But I would hope that boys and men would watch some of these conversations as well, because they're really important. And again, because we want to remove the idea of shame from the woman, what would you say to someone who receives an image like this? I suppose we're generally talking about a boy or a man, maybe gets an image like this. And what would you say to them to encourage them to change how they're thinking about those type of images?
So I want people to just remember, first of all, there's a picture behind that image. I think people think, oh, it's a laugh when you're getting someone's photo sent to them, and don't think this person has not consented to me seeing their image or seeing them in this way. I think we just often forget that there's a person behind the photo. Like, these aren't just some sexy photos. This is a person you're looking at. And also now they need to realize that it's also a crime, because at the minute there's still photos and videos being shared constantly that I'm getting sent to people. So to be honest, they just don't really care. And it needs to be a conversation of, okay, number one, you're violating someone's consent, and number two, it's now a crime and you can go to jail for it.
And that whole idea, and you hear it time and time again, and I don't really know how people haven't moved on from this, but the idea that, oh, a woman took those images in the first place, and she shared them with one person. Oh, she must have known. She should have known that they were going to get somewhere. Like, that's such a harmful view in the first place. But that idea of, okay, you can consent to your images being used in a certain way, but that doesn't mean you want everybody around the world to see them.
Yeah. Consent is not transferable. So if I give one person consent to view my images, I don't give consent for that to be taken without my consent and share anywhere that I don't give consent for them to be shared. And that's basically what it boils down to. And it is consent-based. Even, okay, so people have a lot of issues with people on OnlyFans saying that it's by consent, but you are still violating that person's consent because it's still a sexual image, and you're still sharing that person in a way that they don't consent to be shared. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had around this. We need more education on consent in general.
And that's actually what I was going to ask you was, now that we have this law, it's obviously a good measure to have in place. But yeah, what else would you be looking for to be done to better protect women online and have better online safety in general?
Okay, so number one is education. So this is the first generation to go up with social media in their pockets constantly. With that, it comes with a lot of added risks. And we have no digital safety education in schools at all, or our sex education is not up to par. We have no proper consent education. So that is number one, getting that message to young people. Number two is a support service. So a support service for all internet crimes in this country. I don't think people realise how big the scope of it is, but it's very much needed. So you'd need nearly a department for image-based sexual abuse. Like, I can't even manage it by myself. I have tons of people helping me. We have stalking, harassment, cybercrimes, all of them. We do need a support service, and we need proper training for the guards as well on how to handle it. That is the next thing as well. So there's an awful lot to be done, but I think the law was the first step, and now you can kind of work on the education and the support service and all the rest that does need to be done, because there's an awful lot. We're lacking in so many areas. I think Ireland is still quite behind. We haven't really come into the 21st century yet. We're kind of, when it comes to like even sex and online safety and everything, I think we're way behind.
Well, hopefully we'll see some progress on that over the coming years, and that it won't take that it'll be quicker, as quick as possible. You said that you went through a very tough time when you were a victim of image-based sexual abuse. How are you doing now?
To be honest, I'm fine. For me, it was switching the narrative from, oh no, I did something so wrong, everyone hates me, to actually, I didn't do anything wrong. If you have an issue with me, it's probably an internalized thing rather than anything I did wrong. And I think attitudes even have changed in the last few years. Like, a lot use OnlyFans as well. So before, if someone had something like OnlyFans, would be so scandalous, and everyone would be talking, you'd be talking the town. Whereas now, I think someone has an OnlyFans and it's kind of like, oh, okay, because it's something that hopefully is getting normalized. Normalized that you should send images. You know what I mean? You should say, okay, hang on, I'm going to have to rephrase that. Okay, it's becoming normalized that women can send images, and there's nothing wrong with a woman engaging in a sexual behavior. It's how we treat the woman when she has done something like that there's no shame surrounding it, that it's something that's okay and normal rather than something to be ashamed about.
And, that could be a really important message to share if there's someone watching this who has gone through the same thing that you have, and like you said, can only really see the darkness and doesn't really see a way out, that hopefully they will look at you, they will hear what you have to say, and they'll be empowered by the way you took control of the situation and how you've progressed since then. So, Megan, thanks so much for chatting to us today. I suppose, like, as we've covered so much, but I suppose, again, just your message to girls and young women today as they're online and they're on social media.
I would say, okay, message to girls. This is actually something I haven't been asked before. Give me 1 minute. So it has to be something powerful. I would just think, educate yourself on how to stay safe, because unfortunately, there's so much that can happen. So know the risks of anything you do, but also know that if something does happen, that it's not your fault. That you can, and if something does happen, you can take control of it and you can take ownership. And you can turn every negative into a positive as much as you think you can't. you can, say you have a bad experience, you can use that to help people.
And Megan, I might just ask you then, what would you love to say to your 14-year-old self?
14-year-old self. I think that this is a strange one, but speak up for yourself. So I always let people talk over me. I let people shrink me down, or silence me for much of my life. It was kind of, I never took myself seriously, or other people didn't take me seriously. And I think as women, we're expected to shrink ourselves down a lot to make other people more comfortable. And I would just say, don't. Just speak up for yourself and be heard, no matter what you have to do to be heard.
Megan Sims, thank you so much for joining us today. You've really given us a lot to think about around the topics of online safety and better protection for women online. So thank you very much.
Thank you.